Good evening, and thank you all for joining today's webinar about the supplemental application for the 2020 Citizens Redistricting Commission. My name is Margarita Fernandez. I'm the Chief of Public Affairs for the California State Auditor, and with me today is Stephanie Ramirez-Redjue. She is our Chief Counsel, and our Senior Staff Counsel, David King. I want to thank all of you for submitting an application, initial and becoming tentatively eligible to continue in the process. It's a very important job and one that is going to have an impact on every region in California, on every resident in California for the next 10 years. So thank you for your interest in establishing fair districts. This webinar is one of several mechanisms that we have in place so that you could have your questions answered as you're completing your supplemental application. We have a training video that's accessible on our website, shapecaliforniasfuture.auditor.ca.gov, that walks you through the entire process of the supplemental application. We also have, of course, and you can submit any questions via our email address, which is shapecaliforniasfuture@auditor.ca.gov, and also you can call us and leave a question or talk to someone on our toll-free number, which is 833-421-7550. This is the third webinar that we've conducted, so if you've watched the others, you may get bored at this little introduction. So we have a short presentation just to go over the timelines and a general high-level overview of the application process. And the rest of the time will be dedicated towards answering your questions and getting responses straight from our legal team. Before we get started, I do want to remind everybody, if they haven't checked their email, the state auditor did make an announcement this morning. She extended the application period, or for the supplemental application period. So you now have 3 additional weeks to complete your application and to get those letter of recommendations in. So the new deadline is October 13th, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. So you'll have that whole weekend up until 11:59, almost midnight, to get those applications submitted. So I have a few housekeeping items before we get started, and I'm going to take a look at my list because sometimes I forget. To ask questions, you must be participating on a computer or via the Zoom app on a mobile phone or tablet. You'll have to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I will read the questions aloud so that everyone can hear the question before it is answered. And we'll do our best to try to get through the questions. If we see some that are similar to one that we've already answered, we may not respond to it because it was previously answered. But if you don't get your question answered today, again, you can email us or you can give us a phone call as well. So with that, I think we should probably get started. As I mentioned before, the presentation will be fairly short, and on today's agenda, we will just describe the process for becoming a commissioner. So it'll be a quick overview and just a reminder of the important timelines. We will also, and again, we'll dedicate most of the time to questions and answers. So you've applied to be part of a 14-member team that will be redrawing the boundaries or the district lines of our congressional, state senate, state assembly, and state board of equalization districts to reflect the new population data. The Voters First Act gave the power to the citizens by creating a Citizens Redistricting Commission to ensure that new and fair political boundaries are created fairly and transparently. And a new commission is created every 10 years. So being a commissioner is an important job, and it's an opportunity that comes only once every 10 years. So why continue? The process does seem a little lengthy and a bit complex, but the redistricting itself takes effort and requires diligence. Unlike many other states, California has an incredible opportunity for citizens like you, like me, to participate in drawing the lines for the congressional, state, and state electoral lines, and to participate in a process that is very public and transparent, meeting with the public, listening to input from different communities, and establishing fair district lines. So the process for becoming a commissioner, as a reminder, the initial application period closed on August 19th. And this step of the process is a supplemental application period, which started August 21st, and as I just said, has just now been extended through October 13th, 2019. So for the few months after that, the applicant review panel will start their very important job of going through all the application material, and we'll begin the process of reviewing applications, holding public meetings, and identifying 120 of the most qualified applicants to interview in May. The applicant review panel will then identify 60 of the most qualified applicants, 20 Republicans, 20 Democrats, and 20 that belong to neither of those two parties, as required by law. At that point, the applicant review panel will transmit the list of the 60 of the most qualified applicants to the legislature. Again, this is a requirement by law that the panel transmit the names of the 60 to the 4 legislative leaders. They will have the opportunity to strike up to 2 names in each of the 3 subpolls for a total of 24, 8 from each of the subpolls. The remaining list of names will be returned to the state auditor, and no later than by July 5th, 2020, the state auditor will randomly select the names of the first 8 commissioners. 3 will be Democrats, 3 will be Republicans, and 2 will belong to neither of those 2 parties. And then no later than August 15th, 2020, those first 8 commissioners will select the remaining 6 commissioners to complete the 14-member applicant review. The 14-member Citizens Redistricting Commission. So what do you need to remember? You need to remember to submit the online application and to ensure that your 3 letters of recommendation are submitted by the deadline, which again is August 13th, 2019. You also need to keep in mind that there may be potential interviews late winter, early spring, and that all the applications will be posted to the website, but they will only be posted until while the applicant is in the active applicant pool. So if a candidate is eliminated, their application will come down. The commission, again, must be established by August 15, 2020. Just a little bit of information to remember while you're completing your application. Each application is assigned a unique ID number, so be sure to save that. You will need that to access your application. And you can save the application at any time. So if you go in and start working on it and aren't quite finished or haven't got it to the point that you're really happy with it, you can save it and submit later. There are also some handy links throughout the application that will take you straight to the regulations if you have a question about something being asked in the application. We will notify you when we have received the application. So you can save your application throughout the process, but you will need to submit it in order for us to actually receive the application. So if you don't receive the notification and you believe you've submitted it, you should either contact us or go back into your application and ensure you've submitted it. There are some essay questions. Most of them will ask you questions strictly related to the criteria, your ability to be impartial, your appreciation for California's diverse demographics and geography, and also your analytical skills. A little bit of information about your essay questions. What we're really looking for is individuals who are able to evaluate information with an open mind to make decisions. So it's okay to have our own point of view, but when we're making decisions for the whole state, we need to consider what's best for the state of California. So we are also looking for individuals who recognize the benefits of California's diversity, who can gather and comprehend data and information, because they will be looking at the population data, listening to various communities of interest, and also ensuring that you comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act. You should also demonstrate your ability to work effectively in a group, and while you're answering the questions, the essay questions, you can draw upon different experiences. It could be your professional life or your personal life or your volunteer activities as well. So now that we've covered the basics, we'd like to open the floor to questions. If you have a question, please type it in and submit it using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Again, if you're not on a computer or using the Zoom app on a mobile phone or tablet to ask questions, you can email us at shapecalifornia's future@auditor.ca.gov, and one of our staff members will respond. So here are our legal team, Stephanie and David. We're ready to help. So the first question, will the questions and answers for all 3 webinars be posted?
Yes, it takes a little while because we've got to format the video and upload it onto our website, but we put up the webinars from last week already, and within the next few days, this one should be up as well.
Okay. How many applications have been filed and completed at this time?
I think last count, if you mean by completed, the same thing we mean, which is you've submitted your supplemental application, and we've also received all 3 of your letters of recommendation, because that's what it takes to have a completed application. Last check for me, I think it was about 81 that we had. That number was from yesterday. I don't think it's been updated yet today.
And the numbers, I believe, you can check on our webpage.
Mm-hmm.
There is a link at the top that says statistics or stats, and if you click that, you can see the number of applications that have been completed and submitted.
Who would be good to ask for recommendations?
Well, I think the most important thing is someone who really knows you, who knows what kind of a person you are, who knows what interests you, what your passions are, knows your work ethic. Typical individuals who have a personal connection to you and are able to articulate to the applicant review panel why you are one of the most qualified applicants in terms of your ability to be impartial and your appreciation for California's demographics and diversity and your relevant and local skills. Every letter doesn't have to hit the same thing, but we definitely want to see 3 letters from people who know you and can tell us about who you are.
And I would encourage you to look at the guidance on writing letters of recommendation. That should be a link that is attached to your supplemental application. And that will just basically repeat everything that Stephanie just said, but also just add that concrete examples are among the most compelling arguments that you can make. Otherwise, we just want people who know you and know your qualifications and can communicate that to the applicant review panel.
Will the writers of the recommendation letters be contacted?
That is possible. All information that applicants submit to this office is subject to verification. It is possible if something in the letter gives rise to a question, we may reach out to that individual. There will also be other background work that we do to verify the information that has been provided to us is true, correct, and updated to the most recent period of time.
What are the time commitments if selected?
This is a really common question everybody has. Again, let's start at the top here. The commission itself gets to decide how it wants to conduct its work. And there are a lot of mechanisms that the commission can utilize in order to minimize the impact in terms of travel and the like. The commission could decide that it wants to break up into subcommittees. And if it does that, it may have different subcommittees cover different regions of the state. So that would impact the time. But generally speaking, very broadly, whatever the commission decides to do, and no matter what tools it uses to be as efficient and and user-friendly as possible. That first year from August 15th, 2020 to August 15th, 2021 is really going to be the busiest part of your service. After that, it should taper off a little bit, depending upon what other work the Commission elects to do and what other activities the Commission decides to engage in. The current Commission has managed to stay pretty busy and engage in a lot of stakeholder outreach and work across the country in terms of trying to encourage citizen redistricting commissions in other states. But again, that first year is probably your most challenging year. And bear in mind that although it is a time commitment and it is really intense during that year-long period, most of the commissioners last time worked. Mm-hmm. They had full-time jobs. Some of them ran their own businesses. And they chose to travel all over the state of California as a group all the time. So even when the Commission elected to work in a manner that required them to all travel everywhere, they were still able to do their jobs.
I would add too that for this question, and I anticipate we're going to get a lot of questions about what the commissioners did, we've held a series of trainings in the last couple of weeks where a number of the former commission members came and spoke about their experience, their day-to-day experience, and just their experience in general with respect to the commission. And if you want to know more about what they did and what they took away from that, I encourage you to view those videos, and they're available on our website.
Regarding family members, do we need to list out all of them, even if they have not contributed financially to any political group?
Yes, you're required under the regulations to complete your application to list all of your family members, so your parents and step-parents, your children and stepchildren, your siblings, your step-siblings, your in-laws, and then there's an opportunity on the application once you've listed all those folks to tell us whether or not they have a bona fide relationship or a special relationship with you. And that means under our regulations, either that you have a shared property interest in the amount of $1,000 or more, the person has provided you or has received from you financial benefit in the amount of $1,000 or more, or you've resided together for a cumulative period of 30 days or more over the course of the last year. So you'll have the opportunity to list all your family members, designate with whom you have a special relationship or a bona fide relationship, and then we'll need to know the activities of those relatives with whom you have a special or bona fide relationship only. So you don't have to gather every detail about every person in your family. You just have to provide their names, identify whether they're bona fide, and for those with whom you have a bona fide relationship, we'll need their information in terms of their political activities.
Can I represent a district other than where I live, such as the Central Coast?
I'm not really 100% clear what you mean by that. Commissioners are chosen to represent the whole state, so you won't necessarily represent your region if you live in the Central Coast or on the Central Coast. You won't be tied to making decisions only for the Central Coast. You'll participate in the decisions that need to be made for the entire state of California. In fact, it takes 9 commissioners out of the 14. 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and 3 others to affirmatively vote to take action on a particular matter. So you'll be working as a group, and while you may have particular knowledge about your area, other members of your commission may very well have thoughts about how those districts should be drawn as well. It's definitely a team effort.
Before the most recent extension, letters of recommendation were due approximately 3 weeks after the supplemental application deadline. When the auditor granted an extension till October 13th, did that extend the letters of recommendation deadline for 3 weeks after that?
The letters of recommendation have always been due on the same date that the supplemental application period closes. When it was the old date, which I don't want to confuse you, but when it was the September date, they were due on that date. Now that it's October 13th at 11:59, that is the deadline by which you must submit not only your supplemental application, but all 3 letters of recommendation.
My wife's family is estranged from us. I do not know the phone number of the estranged family, nor do I want them to be contacted. Do I have to list them in the family area? I know that they do not meet the conflict of interest of standards. How should I approach this subject?
Well, you definitely have to list them. And you're not the first applicant who has raised this issue. Many of us have families that are spread out all over the country or with whom we no longer have close relationships, and that's okay. But we still do need to have the names and the contact information of those individuals. And what we're asking applicants to do is engage in some reasonable due diligence. You may not have your brother's phone number if you're estranged from him, but there's probably another relative with whom you still have a relationship where you could get that information. I'm not really clear what's meant by that last part about not meeting the conflicts. I don't know whether that means the person believes they have no conflicts or they're not bona fide. But either way, we need you to walk through all steps of that application so that we can verify, in fact, that that information you're providing is correct and that you are qualified to serve.
And just to add to that, the reason we ask for this information is because under the government code, we're required by law to make sure that commission members don't have a conflict of interest that would disqualify them from serving in the commission. And those statutes set forth these conflict rules that extend to members of your immediate family. And that's why we need to ask you about them so we can verify that there's no conflict.
Right. I'm sorry. Please, I only saw 4 essay questions. Can you list them all?
There are spaces for 4 essay questions. I believe the first 3 ask about your ability to be impartial, your analytical ability, and your appreciation for diversity in California. And those 3 criteria are the same criteria that the panel will review your application on. The 4th one is a space for you to add anything else that you feel is going to make you stand out in the application process. So it's more of an open-ended question for you to add anything that you feel will make you a good candidate. And
there's also a general essay about why you think the work is important, why you think what the commission does is important. That's another essay that is there. So we're focusing on the 3 criteria that the ARP must focus on, which is relevant analytical skills, ability to be impartial, and appreciation for California's demographic and geographic diversity. But then we're asking for a couple more. Why do you think service on this commission is important? And also, is there anything else that you feel you should share with us to help us get to know you a little better?
How soon after submitting the supplemental application will the email confirmation arrive in my inbox?
Well, that depends. You should almost relatively quickly receive notification that your supplemental application itself has been submitted. When you get your letters of recommendation, you'll also receive confirmation that we've received a letter from person X or person Y. So the entire process in terms of when you get notification depends on when your letter writers get those letters submitted.
Can you tell us why, in a majority Democratic state, why there are equal numbers of each major party on this commission?
The reason is that that's what the voters approved when they voted for Propositions 11 and 20 in 2008 and 2010. We are following the law as is written, as we're required to do, and that is the current makeup of the commission in the law. That can't be changed without some significant work on behalf of either the commission itself and or the voters if it goes to a new proposition measure.
If the legislative leaders, as many exercise their strikes, as many as 24 out of the 60 names, will only 36 proceed to the lottery?
That is correct. It's not a total of 36. It's groups of 12, 12, and 12. So it'll be 12 Democrats. There'll be a drawing out of the 12 Democrat list, and then there'll be a drawing out of the 12 Republican list, and there'll be a drawing out of the 12 other lists. So we'll be drawing them separately.
To confirm, the letters of recommendations are due no later than October 13th, 2019.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. And that is one of the reasons why the state auditor decided to extend this application period, because we were told by a number of you that you were having some difficulty getting your letters of recommendation in on time. So please push your letter writers to get those in early. Your application is not complete until we've received all 3 of your letters.
Do I need to provide family information regarding my deceased husband and/or his siblings?
Deceased husbands don't fall within the definition of family members in this report, but the deceased husband's living family members who fall within that definition do still need to be reported.
Unless you've remarried, in which case your new husband's family information would be pertinent.
May we turn in more than 3 letters of recommendation?
Absolutely. Now, this is a little tricky for folks. The first 3 letters that we receive here at the California State Auditor's Office are the letters that we will be uploading as part of your letters of recommendation. If we receive additional letters on your behalf, those will be uploaded as public comments, and you'll receive notification that a public comment has been received relating to you, not a letter of recommendation. But even last time, we had folks who got more than 1 letter or more than 3 letters, and they just came in as public comments.
So the first 8 selectees are made by the state.
The first 8 commissioners for the 2020 commission will be randomly selected out of those batches of 12 applicants that we talked about just a few minutes ago. So assuming that the legislature makes all of its authorized strikes, we'll get a list of 12 Democrats and 12 Republicans and 12 who are not affiliated with either party, and we will be selecting from those pools to select the first 8. Yes.
Does your employment history have to be linear? I filled out the last 10 years with the same company, but have experience that may be relevant from the past.
You can add as many entries on your employment history as you'd like. You can do the same if you have multiple degrees from a college. And same with family members. You can add as many family members as is appropriate for you. So absolutely not a concern.
Will people who have submitted supplemental applications be allowed to retrieve them and refine their questions now that the deadline has been extended for everyone else?
I believe that the way that the system works is that once you've submitted your application remains in its current form until the close of the supplemental period. So that would be October 13th at 11:59 p.m. And then thereafter, if you'd like to make an amendment to your application, you may do so, and that is all listed with your application materials on the website when those names go up of those who've we've received supplemental applications from.
Will the names of family members, including children, be published on the website?
Names, yes, but not contact information, not their addresses, not their telephone numbers, not their email addresses, etc.
So I know we've answered the time requirements question, but the second part to this question is, what is the compensation plan?
So under the current commission, commissioners are entitled to $300 a day and a per diem that they receive on days that they perform commission work. That amount is set to be adjusted pursuant to the Consumer Price Index, but we're not allowed to make that adjustment until December of 2019. We think it's going to be about $375 a day, but please don't hold us to that because we don't have the calculation numbers available to us yet. And then in addition to that, if commissioners incur reasonable expenses as a result of their work, maybe they went to lunch or they had to travel and get a hotel room, they're permitted to be reimbursed for those reasonable expenses.
Okay. In an earlier webinar, I remember someone saying there was a video of a former commissioner describing his experience. Where is that video? Do you want me to take that? It is in the applicant review panel page of the Shape California's Future website. So if you go to that page and you scroll to the August 28th, 30th public meeting, you can find all the material and all the videos from those public meetings.
And they were, our commissioners came, what, the 29th and 30th, right?
Yeah, the last 2 days.
So the last 2 days of that meeting is when the commissioners spoke, and there were 3 of them, all very interesting and insightful. Highly recommend you take a look at it.
I have made partisan comments on Twitter. Should I delete my Twitter account now?
That is up to you. We absolutely may be conducting social media searches to see, are you the type of person who is so politically entrenched that you can't be impartial, you can't set aside your political views to make decisions that are best for the individuals whose district maps you're drawing. Whether you choose to delete your Twitter account is entirely up to you.
I do not have any relationship with my father's family. Nobody in my family does. My father is deceased, and I do not have contact information for any of them. I don't even know how many of his sisters are still alive, if any. I don't know anything about any kids they may have. I've never met them as far as I know. What am I expected to do in that case?
We've got a number of questions about this, and Stephanie, you touched upon this earlier a little bit. The questions usually come in the form of how do I report information that I just don't know, or I don't have access to, or family members are estranged. The reason we ask for that information is for a number of reasons. One is to determine whether there's been a conflict of interest based on some activity performed by an immediate family member. So what we would ask is that you answer to the best of your ability. Please conduct a search as diligently as you can, but we understand that in many cases you can't get that information. So if there's a point at which you just cannot supply the requested information, we ask that you note that you can't supply that information and perhaps explain why you can't get that information. And that will help those reviewing your panel or reviewing your application understand that your application isn't incomplete. It's just that you, after making a search, did your best and you still could not get that information.
Right. And I think in a circumstance like that, I'm assuming that you probably know at least some names. Mm-hmm. Put down what you know, put down what you can, and just be sure to indicate that you don't know so that no one suspects you of not giving forthright information.
May I submit a letter of recommendation from a couple?
I assume you can. It's if they both want to sign the same letter. I suppose so. I don't know whether that's happened before, but mm-hmm. you would only be able to submit one letter from that couple because if you submitted 2, that's going to take up your second slot.
I believe at least a form for submitting a letter requires you to include a certification attesting to the truth of the statements mm-hmm. in that letter. So I suppose you would have to pick one person or even both to make that certification.
Right, and it's possible that the letter writer could say, for example, my husband and I have known David mm-hmm. for 20 years. That works too.
Are state employees eligible to serve on the commission? I work in a public higher education system. Would that be a conflict?
Generally, it would not. There would be a conflict of interest if you were, for example, appointed by the governor or a member of the Board of Equalization or a legislative member. But in most cases, for most state employees, they are considered appointed by the department or the agency that hired them, and that in and of itself would not be disqualifying.
For the question, list all of the monetary and non-monetary contributions valued at a total of $250 or more that you have made in any single calendar year during the past 2 years to any professional, social, political, volunteer, and or community organization or cause. Does that mean a total of $250 or $250 or more to a single entity?
It is $250 or more to a single entity cumulatively. So if you gave $50 every month, that would bring you over the $250 total for that calendar year. But it is to each entity that we're referring to.
Okay. Can you, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. It says, can you describe how a commissioner accomplishes their task? How often do they meet? Where? How much time will be required?
So again, we would refer you back to the videos that the three different commissioners, Mr. Parvenu, Mr. Baraba, and Mr. Anchetta, presented here before the ARP. They were able to offer some of that information. And one thing I think is really important to bear in mind is that the commission will have the authority to hire legal counsel and an executive director and support staff, so that the commission itself will not be, running the entire office on its own. They'll have advisors, they'll have consultants, they'll have vendors, and they'll have staff. And as I indicated when we first started this webinar, the commission has a lot of autonomy in deciding how it's going to go about this work. It's, again, entirely possible that the commission may decide that they're going to travel as a group of 14, just like the 2010 commission did, and go all across the state together to speak with folks. On the other hand, the commission could operate remotely or could operate via subcommittees. They could do webinars just like we're doing right now. I think they have a lot of decisions to make about what is the most effective way to get their work done, and so you'll have some control in sort of shaping how you as a group are going to undertake the work.
Okay. I sit on a city commission for Parks and Rec. This is an appointed position by the city council. Does that disqualify me?
No, being appointed to sit on a city commission would be an appointment to a local office, and the conflict of interest rules would disqualify you if you were appointed or elected to sit on a federal or state office. So in this case, an appointment to a local office would not be disqualifying.
Okay. For family information, I have a first-degree relative with whom I have not been in contact for many years. I have her last known address, but not her phone number. However, phone number is a required field. How do I fill out the field?
So again, we would encourage you to undertake a reasonable and diligent inquiry. Usually in families, there's someone who knows where the current location is of a relative, even if you don't necessarily have a close relationship with that person anymore. So I would encourage you to make some inquiries, and then if you still can't find out, it's perfectly fine to write into that field unknown. As long as you're telling the truth and being honest and you've tried really hard, there isn't much more we can expect of you in that regard.
Okay. Can you expand on the process of submitting the letters of recommendation? It doesn't appear that people write letters and submit them, but rather fill out an online form. What does that entail?
So there are many ways that the letters of recommendation can come in. We've tried to make it as simple as possible on the applicants and the letter writers. Each applicant should have been assigned a specific code to use for each author of each letter of recommendation. So you should have received 3 codes that you would have assigned, for example, one to Stephanie Ridgway and one to David King and one to Margarita Fernandez. And if you've done that, the letter writers can submit their letters to us electronically by uploading them onto our system. And that's one way that the letters can come in. But we can also accept them via US mail. We've received them via email. We've received them via fax. And all of that information is listed on our website so that your letter writers can utilize whatever is the most effective way for them to get the information in to us.
And also the codes that you mentioned are these links that are each 3 unique links. So if your letter writer is going to submit it electronically, they should each use each of their unique links. If your letter writer is going to be submitting their letter by mail or by email, they should make sure that your applicant ID number
Yes.
is attached to that letter so we know who that letter attaches to.
Yeah, that's really important. And in fact, we've already received some letters where we can't tell which applicant we're talking about. So be sure that your letter writers include your name and your applicant ID number on any correspondence that they submit on your behalf.
Which is similar to a question that was just asked about how can we check if my letters of recommendation has incorporated this number. And I think they just need to remind the letter writers.
Remind the letter writers, if we receive something and we're not sure who it goes to, we're going to reach out to the letter writer and try to find out. But of course, we're all mindful of that October 13th deadline. So do what you can to help facilitate your letter writers getting those letters into us directly and quickly and tied to you and your ID number, just to make sure that they're received on time. And then we will notify you as we receive them. So you should have some sense of how many we've received on your behalf.
Okay, we'll switch topics now. I work for a local Native American organization, which is considered federal land and property. Will that provide any conflict in regards to the position?
I think it's going to depend on how you got the position, who appointed you to the position. I mean, if it's the tribe, that's not a conflict. It's whether or not it's by a member of the legislature, a member of the Board of Equalization, or the governor, etc. So if you have more detailed information that you'd like to provide to us, you're welcome to email our Shape California's Future at auditor.ca.gov email address, or you can call our 1-800 number, 833-421-7550. And we can try to provide you more specified information based on your particular situation. But remember, what matters in these instances really is who made the appointment to whatever position you are holding.
Okay. Where do the interviews take place?
Right here in sunny Sacramento. Of course, it probably won't be sunny in February and March, but yes, you will. We talked about this in our first webinar, I think. The way that it's going to work is once the ARP determines the 120 individuals that they would like to interview, we'll be notifying those individuals that, congratulations, you've been selected to move forward through the interview process, and we'll post up a sign-up sheet that you can log in and sign up for the date and time of the interview that works best for you. It's first come, first serve. So when you get that notification, jump on your computer right away to ensure that you get the time slot that works best for you. But the interviews will take place over a period of several weeks between roughly mid-February or early April.
Would it be a conflict if I requested a reference letter from a city elected officials?
No, not a conflict of any kind. We get a lot of questions like this, and for us, the most important thing is knowing that your letter writers actually know you and are familiar with who you are and the work that you've done and the causes that are important to you. It's not a black mark or an advantage. It's not an advantage or disadvantage to have a famous letter writer or an elected letter writer or, just a really close friend.
Okay. Will the 2020 commissioner be able to review documentation and methodology used from prior commissions to see how it may help in their work?
I think that's entirely possible. As you're likely aware, the state auditor's office isn't responsible for any of that redistricting, so we don't have those materials, but it's our understanding that the 2010 commission has retained at least some of those materials and is sorting through them to get them organized so that they might be useful to you. Again, the other piece that I think is really important here is, you will have legal counsel, you will have an executive director, you will have contracted and regular staff who can assist in helping you decide how to do this work.
Should we discuss previous history of runs, unsuccessful, for political office in the application?
I think I would be inclined to probably mention that, because if you've run for public office and you don't mention it, someone may comment publicly on that in a way that suggests you're not being forthcoming, which even if it isn't true, that could happen. So I would definitely mention my prior involvement in political activity.
Do the letters of recommendation need to follow a specific format?
They don't have to follow a specific format, but just going back to the guidance on writing letters of recommendation, there is a recommended format, usually starting with a paragraph that describes who the letter writer is, and then moving on to another paragraph describing the applicant and going into why that applicant would be a good candidate. But that's not a requirement by any means. It's more of a suggestion.
Does the commissioner position create any type of conflict of interest in a legal position?
I don't think so. I'm a little unclear what is meant by the question in terms of the specifics, but I don't think there's any automatic conflict that results from serving on the commission. In fact, we had some commissioners who were attorneys last time. So unless you've got something really specific in mind that's of a concern for you, I don't think so. On the other hand, if you're a redistricting attorney who's represented 4 of the vendors who do this kind of work in California, you're probably going to have a conflict under the Political Reform Act rules that might prohibit you from voting on those contracts or weighing in. But those are really specific facts that we can help you get through if you want to send us an email. But generally speaking, just being legal counsel or being a licensed attorney, there's no bar or conflict there.
Okay. For the family member question, is a spouse considered someone you are married to? I am not married and don't have a registered domestic partner, but I have a significant other whom I live with and own property with. Would I include him as a spouse even though we are not married?
I think if I were in your shoes, I would be inclined to do that, although the regulations that govern it specifically say, spouse or registered domestic partner. As we've mentioned here already, there will be ample opportunity for public comment. And again, you don't want to make it seem like you're withholding information. So you could simply write, John Smith, significant other. So it's clear that John Smith isn't your husband. But I think I'd be inclined to list that information.
Okay. The 500-word limitation for each essay is a challenge. Is there any guidance on whether it is better, by way of example, to identify 2 life experiences at length rather than 6 more superficially?
Well, everyone's subject to the same word limitation. So you have that as comfort. And there's also opportunity for you to provide other information. So if you have one essay where you're talking about 1 or 2 really eventful experiences for you, but there are 3 others that you'd like to bring up elsewhere, well, the place to do that would be in the other information we'd like to know about you section. And there's also the opportunity for public comment. So you yourself can make a public comment that says, I've also done these things. That's perfectly fine. And certainly if you're interviewed, you'll have ample opportunity to share all of your life experiences with the panel.
Okay. On what basis does the legislature turn down applicants? And is it the entire legislature, or can one person make the decision?
So it's the 4 legislative leaders. That would be the Speaker Pro Tem, or the Speaker, the Pro Tem of the Senate, and then minority leadership in both houses. Those are the 4 individuals who get to make strikes from the list of 60 that we send over. We don't know the criteria that they use to make those decisions. We're independent from the legislature, and so we won't be asking, but it is the 4 leaders in both houses. So again, the Speaker's office and the minority leadership in the Assembly, and same on the Senate side, the pro tem and minority leadership in the Senate.
For those chosen to serve, will there be training available?
Absolutely. We ourselves will do a little bit of training, not only for the first 8 commissioners who are chosen, but then also the full 14, the additional 6 that are brought in. And then I anticipate that the commission itself will likely have some additional training and instruction that they also want to undertake as part of their work.
Do we need to report donations to alma mater?
Well, I think it depends on the value.
If it exceeds the threshold,
Right.
I think it would be a good idea to include those donations. And donations to alumni, alma maters would be the same to us as any donation to any other cause or organization, because it reflects what kind of person you are. And those donations will show the applicant review panel where your values are and what's important to you. And I think that's all information that needs to be included.
Yes, absolutely.
Can recommenders be from out of state?
Yes, no question, absolutely.
May we have the email to send the letters of recommendation? My recommendations were given to me in paper form for me to for my delivery as needed.
So you can send those to Shape California's Future at auditor.ca.gov. That's a perfectly acceptable way to send them in, and they're probably really efficient because they're already in electronic format, so it's easy to get them up. On the other hand, if you have some other need about getting your letters in for whatever reason, please don't hesitate to call the folks who are manning the hotline. Again, it's 833-421-7550. We don't want you stuck on technical stuff, and we do have people who are available to help, so don't hesitate to call.
Okay, can you submit more than 3 letters of recommendation?
So we talked about this a little bit. Yes, you can. They'll need to be uploaded as public comments, though. This office will accept the first 3 letters that we receive, and then any additional letters that we receive, we will add as public comments.
Is there an age conflict? Too old, too young?
Well, technically, no. However, because the law requires that you be an individual who's been registered to vote and you've participated in the last 3 general elections, walking that back means you probably can't be 18 because you won't have had an opportunity to be registered and not have switched parties and also voted in the last 3 elections. But, as long as folks can do the work, as the commission decides it should be done, there really aren't any limitations. You'll want to make sure that you have the time and energy and ability to perform the work with or without an accommodation, which can be arranged if you need it. So there's nothing in the law that prohibits people from being too old or too young, except those darn requirements that you be continuously registered to vote and vote at the last 2 or 3 general elections.
Okay, what pool of applicants will the first 8 commissioners draw from to select the remaining 6 commissioners?
They'll be required to mix it up. I think it's 2, 2, and 2, right? So they'll do 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans and 2 others, and they're required to present those names as a slate. So they'll put forth a list of 6 names altogether for consideration by the first 8 commissioners.
And they'll be drawn from the same subpool that they
Yes.
themselves were randomly drawn from.
Correct.
Okay. If your family members are military with confidential top secret clearance, will their names be published or kept confidential?
Well, we wouldn't necessarily know that they had top secret clearance. So we would be including their names. Certainly don't share with us any top secret information. For example, if you have a brother who's, or a sister who's stationed in a war zone and that information can't be released, their APO should be fine, their post office address or their home address if they're local. If they're, but I don't think we ask for any classified information. In other words, I don't think you have to put on there that your relative is a spy.
Right. And if you feel like a question is asking you for for confidential information,
Call
we
us.
wouldn't call us or indicate on the application that the information being requested is confidential or top secret, and that you won't be disclosing that.
Right.
Okay. How do I see the letters that have been posted?
No letters have been posted yet. If you're talking about the sample document, it's got the guidance. That's on our website. But as of right now, we're no supplemental applications are up and available, and that includes letters of recommendation. Those will all be uploaded at the close of the supplemental application period after we do our redactions and our reviews. And that'll be the point in time when you'll be able to see them. If you'd like to see them beforehand, you need to get in touch with the person who submitted the letter on your behalf and ask to see the letter, because quite frankly, we don't have the manpower to be sending letters back out to applicants. We're working real hard to make sure that everybody's letters get uploaded into the system.
Okay. We're getting close on time, but I think we have time for another one or two more questions. So what support does the state provide for the commission?
Well, the governor's office provides office space. The Department of Finance and the legislature and the governor provide funding via budget allocation. And then the commission itself has some autonomy to make some decisions. Our office has a responsibility under the law to make sure that we're providing support to the commission until the commission is fully functional. And so our office will do its part to make sure that we have at least provided temporary assistance to the commission when it first is fully formed, so that the commission has the support it needs to make more permanent hiring decisions, post positions, and the like. But again, you should have office staff. You should have consultants under contract, possibly on payroll. You should have an executive director. You'll probably have a communications person, and then just general support staff as well. That's what the last commission ended up having.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Are current commissioners eligible to apply for this round of new commissioners?
No. The law is quite clear that a commissioner's term expires when the first new commissioner is drawn. And so at the end of 10 years, commissioners are no longer on the commission, and they should not reapply.
Okay. Actually have one more time for one more. Does it matter if none of my family members live in the U.S.?
No. We just want to know who they are and where they are, and it sounds like it'll be pretty easy. I mean, I don't know whether they're going to be contributing to California elections, but odds are no. Odds are it should be fine.
They should still be disclosed, though.
Absolutely
their
disclosed.
immediate family members.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was underestimating. I think we have one more time for another one. What software applications are used for modeling and map development?
That's going to be entirely up to the commission itself. Odds are the commission is going to contract with a vendor to help with the map drawing. And I am assuming that part of the RFP and the analysis that goes into deciding what vendor to choose will be based in part on the software that the vendor uses. But you'll make many of your own rules, except those that you're required to follow for map drawing, and you'll have choices.
Okay, I think we are out of time now. So thank you to everyone who participated in today's webinar. Again, I want to reiterate the new deadline to submit a supplemental application and the letters of recommendation. The deadline is October 13th, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. If you have any additional questions, you can email Shape California's Future at auditor.ca.gov or call us at 833-421-7550. You can visit our website there, shapecaliforniasfuture.auditor.ca.gov. I want to remind everybody that the prior webinars are posted. You will find them on our homepage underneath the key date information, and the information, the video from this webinar will also be posted so you can watch it at any time. Thank you again for participating today and for your interest in being part of the 2020 Citizens Redistricting Commission to shape California's future.
Good night.
Thank you.